The wind sliced across the icy Arkansas highway like a cold knife as 17-year-old Sadie Malone sat in the passenger seat of her father's idling 18-wheeler, now awkwardly pulled over onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking into the creeping dusk. A red warning light on the dashboard had been flashing for 30 minutes, and now the semi sat silent, its powerful engine reduced to nothing more than a hunk of frozen steel. Jack Malone, her father, a weathered man with hands like knotted rope and a face carved by time and long miles, muttered curses under his breath, his calloused fingers drumming nervously on the wheel. They were behind schedule, hauling a load of emergency supplies to a flood-struck town 2 states over, and now this mechanical betrayal threatened to undo everything. "I'll call dispatch," Jack growled, reaching for the CB, but before his fingers touched it, Sadie was already unbuckling her seatbelt and swinging open the door. "No," she said firmly, her breath already fogging in the cold. "Let me take a look." Jack hesitated, his brows knitting together. "Sadie, it's a diesel engine. You're good. But this ain't a high school science fair project." But she was already out of the cab, her boots crunching over the ice-crusted gravel, tugging her long hair into a quick bun, the stubborn kind that said she wasn't asking for permission. She popped open the side panel of the semi, exposing a maze of tubes, belts, wires, and gears, an anatomy she knew better than the back of her own hand. Jack had raised her among grease-stained overalls and the smell of motor oil, teaching her to speak the language of pistons and spark plugs, while most girls her age were worrying about prom dresses and Instagram filters. She climbed up the side of the truck like she'd done it 1,000 times, flashlight clutched between her teeth, hands diving into the mechanical guts of the vehicle. The cold bit into her fingers, turning skin pink and raw, but she didn't flinch. 10 minutes passed in focused silence as she probed deeper into the engine block, tracing wires, inspecting hoses, wiping frost from suspicious-looking connections. And then she found it, a clean break in the fuel injector connector, nearly hidden under a tangle of frostbitten lines. "Gotcha," she whispered to herself, pulling out the multi-tool Jack gave her on her 15th birthday, a rugged thing with scratches and wear from countless roadside repairs. She sliced away the ruined end, stripped the wires, rerouted the flow, and reconnected it with the steady hands of someone who had done this before, just never in this kind of cold, under this much pressure, with this much riding on her success. Once the last clamp was tightened, she called out, "Try it now." Jack hesitated, staring at her from the cab like he was watching a ghost. Then he turned the key. The semi shuddered, coughed, and then, like a dragon waking from slumber, roared back to life. Sadie wiped her hands on a rag, a small smile playing on her lips. "Basic mechanics," she said as she climbed back in the cab, and a little battlefield improvisation. Jack blinked, shaking his head in disbelief. "Where in the hell did you learn to do that?" "From you," she said simply, "and a little from watching Liam." The mention of her brother's name darkened the mood slightly, like a shadow creeping over sunlight. But before Jack could respond, red and blue lights flared behind them, and a state trooper's cruiser rolled to a stop with a crunch of snow behind their trailer. The trooper stepped out slowly, tall and broad-shouldered, the brim of his hat already crusted with snow. His flashlight flicked over the truck, then onto Sadie as she stepped out again. "Evenin'," he said, his tone professional but curious. "Everything all right here?" Sadie gave a nod, wiping more grease from her hands. "Engine trouble, but it's fixed now." The trooper tilted his head. "You fix the semi-engine?" His gaze slid from her young face to the toolbox, still open on the side. "You got ID, miss?" She nodded, unzipping her jacket and reaching inside. What she pulled out wasn't a license or a student ID. It was a worn silver chain that shimmered faintly in the trooper's beam. Hanging from it were 2 dog tags, dulled by time and sweat and memory. The trooper's face changed the instant he saw them. He stopped mid-step, his voice dropping. "You serve?" he asked softly. Sadie shook her head. "No," she said, her voice quieter now, the steel in it replaced with something more fragile. "They're my brothers. Army Specialist Liam Malone. He didn't make it back from Kandahar." The trooper didn't speak at first. His eyes lingered on the tags as though reading the name etched into them, twice, once on each tag. The cold seemed to settle around them, a moment frozen not by weather, but by respect. Jack stood beside his daughter now, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "She wears them every day," he said, "not because she has to, but because she promised him she'd keep going, keep fixing things, keep helping where she could." The trooper looked at her again, longer this time, not as a teenage girl with dirty hands and stubborn eyes, but as something much more. Then, without another word, he lifted his right hand and saluted her. Not her father, not the truck, but her. Sadie's expression didn't change. She just nodded, solemn and respectful, and returned the gesture, not with a salute, but by holding the tags a little tighter in her hand, close to her chest. The trooper gave them a brief escort until they were back in motion, the semi now humming beneath them like nothing had ever gone wrong. But Jack knew better. Something had changed. The world had stopped and acknowledged his daughter, not as a mechanic's kid or a trucker's sidekick, but as someone worthy of respect. As they rolled down the highway, once more, Sadie didn't say much. She stared out the window, the dog tags still visible just above the zipper of her jacket, catching the occasional flash of light. Jack didn't push her to talk. He just drove, his chest a little fuller than it had been that morning. Pride mingled with pain in the rearview mirror of his mind. Because sometimes it wasn't just the engine that needed fixing. Sometimes it was the people. And tonight, under a cold Arkansas sky, his daughter had done both. The hum of the semi's engine filled the cab like a distant heartbeat as they merged back onto the dark highway, headlights slicing through the foggy night, miles unspooling beneath their tires. Inside, the silence between Sadie and her father was thick, not cold or hostile, but weighted with unspoken things, grief, pride, memories too painful to name. Jack glanced sideways at his daughter, her face lit dimly by the dashboard glow, eyes fixed on the road ahead, dog tags glinting faintly just below her collar. Pride swelled in his chest like a tide he couldn't hold back, but it was shadowed by something heavier. Regret, perhaps, or helplessness, the ache of a father who couldn't shield his children from a world that took as much as it gave. He cleared his throat, voice low and unsure, like stepping onto a frozen lake. "You don't talk about him much anymore." Sadie didn't turn her head. Her jaw tightened slightly, but her eyes never left the highway. "It hurts," she said softly, as if saying more would splinter her. Jack nodded slowly, the road reflected in his eyes. "I know." A pause stretched long between them before he added, "He'd be proud of you. You know that, right?" Sadie didn't answer. A single tear rolled down her cheek, silent and stubborn, just like her. Jack looked away, swallowing something hard in his throat. In that quiet moment, time seemed to slow, and the cab became more than just a machine's shell. It was a memory capsule, rolling forward but thick, with everything they'd carried since Liam's deployment, and everything they hadn't said since the call came. They rode like that for a long stretch, the hum of tires on asphalt the only sound, until the glow of the way station appeared in the distance, its floodlights cutting through the haze like searchlights. Jack downshifted as they approached, easing the rig into the inspection lane. A DOT inspector in a neon vest motioned them to stop, clipboard in hand, his face neutral, already expecting a delay or an issue. But before he could say a word, a familiar figure stepped forward from the shadows. The state trooper from earlier, hat in hand now, expression softened. He approached with calm authority, nodding to the inspector. "They're clear," he said. The inspector frowned. "You sure? This your call?" The trooper glanced at Sadie through the window, then back to the inspector. "She's the reason that truck is still running," he said, "and she's carrying more than just freight." The inspector hesitated, then stepped back with a respectful nod. Jack gave the trooper a silent thumbs up, then pulled forward. As the semi eased back onto the road, the silence returned. But this time it was different, less heavy, more reverent. Sadie's fingers instinctively reached into her jacket pocket, curling around a cool steel of Liam's tags. She held them tightly, the familiar edges biting softly into her palm, grounding her in memory. I promised him, she whispered, so quiet it might have been to herself. I'd keep moving forward. Jack heard her but said nothing. Some words didn't need answers. They just needed room to live. The road stretched on. And with it came the rhythm of a night, mile after mile of open space, broken only by flickering gas station signs, shuttered diners, and the occasional howl of wind through the trees. Sadie stared out the window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. She saw her brother's face in her mind, laughing, teasing, the way he used to throw her over his shoulder and pretend she weighed nothing. He had taught her how to tie knots, how to keep calm in chaos, how to stand her ground when the world tried to knock her over. Stay tough, Sadie-bug, he used to say. You've got more fire in you than most soldiers I know. She remembered the day they lost him. How Jack had come in from the porch with eyes she'd never seen before. How her mother collapsed in the hallway. How everything shifted sideways and never quite straightened again. Since then, Sadie had stopped playing music, stopped writing in her journal, stopped being a kid. She'd learned how to rebuild engines instead, something solid, something she could fix with her hands. But even grease couldn't scrub away grief. You know, Jack said after long, while his voice tentative, Liam always said you were stronger than me. Sadie gave a small, humorless laugh. He lied. No, Jack said, firmer now, he saw something in you. Something I didn't fully understand back then. But tonight, I saw it too. She looked at him then, really looked, for the first time in what felt like weeks. His eyes were red-rimmed but clear, and in them was something she hadn't seen since before Liam left. Hope, maybe, or healing. You raised us both, she said. He got the courage. I just got stubborn. Jack smiled faintly. Sometimes that's the same thing. The cab felt quiet again, but the silence no longer hurt. It held space for two people who were finally beginning to find each other again. The highway turned into hills, and the hills into long stretches of darkness broken only by the glow of rest-stop vending machines. They stopped briefly for coffee, and Jack came out with two hot cups, one black, one caramel heavy with sugar, just how Sadie liked it. She took it with a small smile and a mumbled thanks. They didn't talk about Liam again that night, but they didn't have to. As dawn began to rise behind them, painting the horizon in strokes of pink and gold, Sadie leaned her head against the window, eyes heavy. The dog tags rested against her chest now, warm from her hand. In her half-sleep, she thought of the trooper. How he'd looked at her not as a girl, but as a force. She had fixed an engine, yes, but she had also fixed something deeper. A broken link between past and future, between grief and purpose. And in doing so, she'd reminded the world, and herself, that strength doesn't always come in the shape of a uniform or a weapon. Sometimes, it looks like a girl in grease-streaked jeans, holding onto her brother's tags and fixing what everyone else had given up on. Behind them, miles back, the state troopers still stood by the station, watching their taillights disappear into the horizon. Something inside him had shifted too. That girl had carried her brother's memory, not as a weight, but as a torch, and in watching her walk with it, he remembered something about service, about resilience, and about the kind of quiet power that doesn't need recognition to be real. In the cab, Jack adjusted the rear-view mirror and glanced again at Sadie, now softly asleep. He didn't wake her. He just kept driving. The road was long, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel lonely. It felt right, like a promise was being kept mile by mile. If this story moved you, inspired you, or gave you chills, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to expect stories for more powerful tales that celebrate resilience, heart, and the unexpected heroes among us. Speech Balloon, drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. Thumbs up, like if you believe in silent strength. Bell, and hit the bell icon so you never miss what's coming next. Because at Expect Stories, the unexpected is just the beginning.